with the heads of the regions and with the representatives of the military industries. Our designers, our engineers, they will continue to travel to the front line, and I would like to thank them for that. They regularly travel there, they introduce the necessary adjustments to their equipment, and I hope that this practice will continue so that we could check the specification of the weapons and of the equipment that is sent over there, so that we could improve it. And we need to work with the agencies and departments, relevant agencies and departments. We see what works well, what needs to be improved. Engineers see this, researchers see this, scientists see this, and this machine is working. When I'm saying that we are improving it, and we will continue to improve our troops and the equipment, that's what I meant. Military-industrial committee should unite the troops, the scientists, to resolve the most pressing and prospective issues. First of all, on the supplies for the troops, I mean equipment, I mean ammunition, and so on. 3, we will continue to support the combat preparedness, and we will improve the nuclear triad. It is the main guarantee to preserve our sovereignty and territorial integrity, of strategic parity, of the balance of the forces in the world. This year, we have more than 91% of the modern equipment, and we are readjusting the forces to use hypersonic avant-garde missiles. In the immediate future, for the first time, we are going to use intercontinental ballistic missile Sarmat and Combat Beauty. Yes, there are some delays, but this does not change our plans. It will be implemented. The troops receive missile complexes YARS. We will continue to develop unique, that has no equivalent in the world, hypersonic complexes, missile complexes. In the beginning of January next year, we are going to put in combat duty frigate Gorshkov with the cutting edge, like I said, that has no equivalent in the world, hypersonic missiles and systems. They are naval-based Zircon. We will continue to equip our strategic forces with cutting-edge weapons. Again, all the plans that we have will be fulfilled. Next, it is important to increase combat capabilities of our aerial forces, including fighters and bombers, when they work in the zone of the modern anti-aircraft systems. And we should improve the use of UAVs, including reconnaissance and strike drones. We should improve the ways we use them. The experience of the special military operations showed that UAVs are now used everywhere, and our units, our troops, they should have these tools. They should find targets as quick as possible, and they should pass the information about the targets in real time. Unmanned vehicles should be connected and create integrated network. They should have protected communication with the staff and with the headquarters. And every soldier should have the opportunity to receive information from such UAVs. Technically, it can be implemented in the immediate future, already now, basically, and I would like to draw your attention to this when you will work on improving the gear of every warrior that is in the zone of special military operation. We know there are no small details on the combat battlefield. That's why I know that the ministry is busy with this now, but I would like to emphasize this. We should think about first aid kits, about rations, about helmets, about vests. Everything should be done at the highest state-of-the-art level. We need to supply enough night vision equipment and rifles of the latest generation. I'm not going to list everything, but I will speak about the main thing. Everything that a soldier needs should be modern, comfortable, convenient, and reliable. Supplies should be done considering the needs, the requirements the army has. If some norms are outdated. It should be adjusted. I would like to draw the attention of the Chief of the General Staff, of all the commanders that are attending this meeting. We have no restrictions, no limitations on funding. The country, the government is giving everything that the army needs, everything.
Соответствующие результаты будут достигаться. Возвращаюсь к теме беспилотников. Отмечу, что у нас есть хороший опыт разработки уникальных подводных беспилотных аппаратов. И знаю, что промышленность располагает всеми возможностями для создания широкой линейки воздушных и наземных беспилотных аппаратов.
Capabilities to develop other types of unmanned vehicles that use various technologies, including AI technologies. We'll need to work on new attack systems as well. And now, number 5, we need to improve communication systems to make sure that our troops can communicate well and efficiently. We need to use AI technologies at every level of decision-making. As experience shows, in the past few months, these systems have been most effective and almost automatic. Next, the partial mobilization has revealed certain problems that we are facing, but we are taking steps to alleviate all of them, and we're trying to build our recruiting system in a modern way. I'm talking about the use of databases, communications with regional authorities, etc. Also, we need to have closer contacts with our industry, and when it comes to providing equipment and resources to the units, to the front lines, that's also essential. The armed forces have drafted 300,000 new servicemen. Some of them are already on the front lines, 150,000. This is a reserve that's enough for the time being, and the people are being trained right now. Colleagues, I'd like to thank those of our citizens that have been wholeheartedly supporting the operation, providing equipment and other resources and food, etc., to the front lines, who've been sending gifts and letters to our soldiers. We have to say that we are really grateful to these people. I bow to you. And also, I think that the Ministry of Defense needs to consider every criticism that they receive and respond to it efficiently. Of course, there are certain issues that arise whenever you tackle such large-scale operations, but we have to hear out the voices of those who see things differently or see some issues or problems. So I hope that the Ministry of Defense will continue to communicate with the people. This unity, this sense of unity has always been a strength of our people. Now let's proceed to the reports, and I'd like to give the floor to the Minister of Defense, Minister Shoigu. Comrade Supreme Commander-in-Chief, I'd like to start my report about the special military operation. Currently, in Ukraine, Russian soldiers are opposed by Western forces, the forces supported by the West. They are providing communications to them, they are sending advisors and specialists, they are waging information war against us, they are waging sanctions war against us. The Ukrainian authorities are using banned types of warfare, including attacking civilians, using heavy equipment to attack civilians. The Western nations are keeping a blind eye to all of that, and the same goes for the attacks on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and the preparations for the use of a dirty bomb. We know that this situation is in favor of the United States. They're trying to make use of this situation to increase their dominance and to weaken other nations, including their allies in Europe. We are especially concerned about the expanded presence of NATO forces near the borders of Russia and the Republic of Belarus, as well as the intention of NATO to make sure that this war lasts as long as possible. Once the real intentions of European leaders, including Ms. Merkel, was revealed, we now see that the revolution that took place, the coup that took place in Ukraine 2014, eventually provoked a military confrontation in the Donbass. We are protecting the population there against genocide and terror. Russia is always open to constructive negotiations and talks, but Russia will continue to destroy military targets and attack military targets and the facilities of the military-industrial complex, as well as other connected facilities, including the energy system facilities. We are crushing the military potential of Ukraine. At the same time, we are taking full-scale measures to prevent any casualties among the civilian population. As a result, the Ukrainian armed forces have suffered severe losses in terms of troops and equipment, and since the start of the operation. To resupply Ukraine, NATO and NATO countries and the US have ramped up military help in Ukraine. Over $97 billion were spent by 27 countries, which is more than the US has spent in Afghanistan. Some of the equipment that was abandoned by the American forces in Afghanistan is now spilling out into other areas across the globe and used by terrorists. We must also note that American specialists, artillery specialists, and intelligence are present in Ukraine, helping the Ukrainian armed forces. There are various types of equipment that are being sent to Ukraine and used there. The US is helping Ukraine with organizing information operations and propaganda operations against Russia. We now see that at the command from Washington, thousands of fake messages are being posted every day. Hundreds of TV channels and printed media and other media resources are being used to target Russia. It is cynical, and it is cynical to see that the Western media are silent about Ukrainian war crimes. At the same time, they're glorifying the crimes of neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian regime. The terrorist methods used by the Ukrainian armed forces are being presented as heroic acts. Ukrainian people are used as human shields by the Ukrainian army. People are being executed for refusing to participate in the war. As a result, we needed to increase our own forces in the theater of actions. So this was a challenge to Russia and to our armed forces. We haven't mobilized the population since the Great Patriotic War. This system was not fully adapted to the new economic and social environment. Since the start of the mobilization, we've faced certain difficulties when it comes to conscripting and drafting people in reserve. all of these issues had to be addressed on the go. We've implemented certain changes to the recruiting officer system and to the system of organization of our armed forces, as well as to the supply systems. Partial mobilization has been completed in full. 300,000 people, servicemen, have been drafted. This was made possible thanks to the consolidated work of our regional authorities and federal authorities. I'd like to especially note the proactive position of many Russian people. Over 20,000 people volunteered to be drafted. Over 830,000 people working for the military-industrial complex and in other critical facilities and industries were relieved from being drafted. Thanks to the decisions made by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, the mobilized people receive the same guarantees as our contract servicemen. The preparations for military operations is carried out, training is being carried out. There's a huge load on our army in its management system, but at the same time, there's a lot that remains to be done until we can fully prepare our servicemen for performing their combat duty. But overall, the partial mobilization was able to improve the capabilities of our armed forces. We've been able to liberate 5 times as much territory as before the mobilization. We've been able to liberate Mariupol from the Nazis. The Kiev regime turned this city into a stronghold with the center in Azovstal. But thanks to the valor of the Russian armed forces and the Donetsk and Lugansk servicemen, over 4,000 fighters were destroyed, eliminated. Over 2,500 nationalists of the Azov battalion have surrendered. Now, in Mariupol, peaceful life is being restored. Seaports are being restarted. Their work there is being restarted. And industrial capabilities are being restored as well. The Azov Sea has once again become Russia's internal sea, as it has always been over hundreds of years of our history. We have restarted land communications with Crimea over railroads and highways. We are restoring communications with the Donbass. Cargo has been delivered to Berdyansk and other liberated towns and cities. By restoring our control over the northern Crimea Canal, we've been able to restore water supply to Crimea as well, uninterrupted water supply. So Russian soldiers have been showing great valor, and they have been performing heroic acts in Ukraine, and they have received multiple awards. Over 250,000 servicemen have received awards. Currently, Russian servicemen are helping people and civilians to return to normal life. Over 27,000 hectares of territory have been liberated. We are recreating and rebuilding schools and kindergartens. 2 cutting-edge hospitals have been created in the liberated territories. In Donetsk and Lugansk, water supply is being restored. Over 1.5 million people have now uninterrupted access to water.
In general, the operation showed the high professional level of the commanders, of officers, of all the staff, and the preparedness of all the soldiers to perform the very difficult tasks. Our equipment and our gear proved reliable and efficient. The special military operation gives the unique opportunity to analyze the modern methods of operations using forces and means to consider them for future planning of armed forces actions. The leadership of the country and the armed forces received unprecedented support from the Russian citizens, which shows the unity between the army and the society. This year, the Ministry of Defense has been resolving a number of other important tasks. In the beginning of the year, with the CSTO member states, we have carried out an operation to stabilize the situation in Kazakhstan. We did not allow a color revolution to take place in this country. The Russian grouping of forces is still the main guarantor of peace in Syria and Nagorno-Karabakh. Throughout the year, we've been demining the territory and help the population with the medical services. Our nuclear triad is preserved at the level that allows us the strategic deterrence. The high level of readiness of the nuclear forces is possible because of the unprecedented level of readiness and of modern equipment that has reached more than 90%. We have finished the construction of 2 nuclear regiments that is now using the Yars complex. Another regiment entered the combat duties that is equipped with the avant-garde missile complex with the hypersonic missiles. Successful launches of new missile of heavy class of Sarmat complex during the state test launches allowed us to start its deployment. Aviation strategic forces now has 2 160T and 2 195M. This year, we have held 3 aerial patrols, 2 of them jointly with the Army of China. Our cruisers and submarines are patrolling designated areas of the world's oceans. Our fleet received a submarine of the Generalissimus Suvorov class, armed with the Bulava missiles, which increases our combat capabilities. Air and Space Forces received unified system and acquired Kupol system that allows us to monitor the dangerous areas in the Northern Hemisphere. We're also developing the training aviation. The students are receiving the new models of training planes. It has been increased by more than 1/3. This year, we have the first graduates among female pilots. More than half of them finished their studies with honor. 6 surface ships, 3 boats, and 11 vessels, maintenance vessels, and 2 shore missile complexes were acquired by our forces. Zircon was added to our forces as well. We have almost completed Admiral Gorshkov with hypersonic missile on board that will be sent to unspecified areas of the world's ocean. The important part of the military state order in 2022 was the procurement. Everything that is necessary for the special military operation to increase the military capability. We have moved the supplies from 2024 to 2023 of the most state-of-the-art weapons. To intensify the supplies, we have come up with a new schedule of supplies, according to which all the supplies are being done. That is being monitored by the Defense Ministry and designated commissions. The amount of funding, considering additional supplies of equipment and ammo, allowed us to increase the amount of weapons sent to the army by 30%, and of ammo and aviation means from 69 to 109%. At the same time, the level of fulfilling the state order was 91%. In 2022, we have done everything that we have planned for the military preparation, including 14 international military exercises of various levels. In the beginning of the year, we carried out a number of large-scale naval military exercises where we worked on countering the military threats to Russia from the oceans and from the seas. The outcome of these events was the military exercises Vostok 2022, which comprised of more than 50,000 troops from 14 various states. The international grouping of troops was created to resolve common goals, and it will be able to efficiently carry out its tasks to enhance international security. Strategic nuclear forces, during their special exercises, worked successfully on the tasks of striking as a retaliation against WMD being used by the adversary. In the Arctic and on the Chukotka Peninsula, we have launched an expedition, and we have carried out a number of exercises. All the weapons proved themselves well under the Arctic conditions. Despite the attempts of the collective West to isolate Russia, we continue to expand our military and military technical cooperation. The Ministry of Defense is developing relations with the armed forces of 109 Asian, African, Middle Eastern, and Latin American countries. This year, we have held 350 important international events. International Army Games became one of the milestones of the joint training with other states. It comprised more than 5,300 troops from various countries. The games that were held in 12 countries were attended by 3 million people. Over the 8 years when the Army Games were held, we have modernized 80 training grounds, which material is actively used for the training of various troops. The closer international military technical ties were facilitated by the annual forum that is called Army, that had delegation of more than 85 countries, and the number of attendants was almost 2 million people. 36 state contracts was signed by the military industrial enterprises for the total amount of more than 525 million. This forum is a dynamically developing project that is exceeding similar exhibitions abroad. In August, we held the 10th Moscow Conference on Security, where more than 700 delegates from 70 countries participated. It is the largest conference, military political conference in the world. This year, we held the first International Anti-Fascist Congress. The state and public activists and the veterans of the Great Patriotic War, 9 delegations from other countries participated in it, and war military attachés from various countries. The participants of the forum condemned any manifestations of fascism, neo-Nazism, xenophobia in the modern world. The It is planned that the Congress will be held annually. Our higher military school is one of the best in the world. The higher education institutions of the Ministry of Defense has cadets from 55 countries, which is exceeding the same indicators of the Soviet times. Starting September 1st of 2023, the network of the military educational institutions will also have Donetsk Military Academy. We continue to develop the military schools, the network of military schools in Russia. Next year, we are going to launch a new military school in Irkutsk. Along with the regional administrations, we have organized work to launch a federal agency on work with veterans. It will allow us to work more efficiently in a more centralized manner to protect the interests of war veterans. Thank you, Mr. President, for the support given to this initiative. 49,000 families of the military received housing, and 200,000 are compensated for the lack of housing. We are paying a lot of attention to the new medical advancements. Over 10 years, the amount of diseases in the armed forces got 10 times less, and we are able to provide 3 times more qualified medical assistance, and the number of services has also increased 2 times. More than 28,000 people received necessary medical assistance. Military doctors proved themselves very well during the special military operation. The first aid is given within the first 10 minutes. Medical units are receiving the wounded within 1 hour, and then they are sent to military hospitals within 24 hours. We're also successful in evacuating the wounded. The lethal rate is less than 0.5%, which is the lowest indicator throughout the history of military medicine. In accordance with your instruction, we have started the program to modify the military medicine facilities. We have a new hospital with 150 beds. We are launching new military hospitals in Ryazan, Yuzhno-Sachalinsk, Kaspiysk, Sevastopol, Mirny, and Vladikavkaz. The unique spa resort on Kamchatka now has a new rehabilitation center. The Ministry of Defense is organizing an effort to counter the coronavirus pandemic. During the 6th wave, we had no upsurges in the number of cases. As for the construction, we have built more than 3,000 buildings. The special attention was paid to developing infrastructure for strategic nuclear forces. This year, we have built 650 high-tech sites for them, also to deploy avant-garde systems, YAR systems, and Sarmat systems. As for the Northern Fleet, we have commissioned shore, energy, and social infrastructure sites in Gajivo. On the Caspian Sea, we have commissioned building worth of more than 1,154 meters. As for the aerodromes, for 15 aerodromes, we have restored the infrastructure to be able to receive all the modern types of aircraft. We have been improving the military settlements. We have finished 625 buildings and parks within these military settlements in accordance with your instruction. The engineering troops continue to work on the Baikal-Amur Railroad. They have completed some 3 million kilometers of groundwork, which is more than half of what was planned. The Ministry of Defense has implemented large-scale patriotic and cultural projects. Military parades were held in 28 cities. Traditionally, we also held the military fleet parade. As per your instruction, over 90 days, we have restored a memorial complex of Sour Mogila. It has eternal flames burning there again. We continue to work on the patriotic education of the younger generation. And the Young Army is at its center that now covers the entire country and unites more than 1 million of adolescents. In close cooperation with the regional administrations, we continue to develop the network of the educational centers for the patriotic education of the younger generation avant-garde. We have opened 20 regional centers and 25 municipal centers with the cities that have more than 100,000 of population.
Overall, in the 88 avant-garde centers, over 150,000 high schoolers have undergone training. We believe that the creation of such centers must be the basis for the creation of the system of patriotic education in Russia. Comrade Supreme Commander-in-Chief, all the objectives set for 2022 have been carried out. The capabilities of our armed forces have risen by over 13%, and our defense capabilities are as high as ever. The measures to improve the security of the Russian Federation, considering the intention of NATO countries to expand their presence on our borders and to expand their alliance by adding Finland and Sweden, we have made a decision to increase the presence of our units in the northwestern regions of Russia. We also would like to provide our citizens an opportunity to be enlisted as contract servicemen. Since the first day they enter the service. Moscow and Leningrad military regions will be established, and the responsibility for the higher commands will be increased for the operations of these units in these regions. In Kherson, Zaporozhye, we will be reforming the operations there. 7 motorized rifle divisions in the central western regions and in the northern fleet will be reformed. In the airborne forces, 2 additional divisions must be formed. For each tank army, a mixed airborne division and an aviation brigade of up to 100 helicopters must be formed. 3 additional divisions, 8 new regiments must be created for each regiment, for each region. 5 artillery divisions for each military region. For each region must be established. In the Navy, based on the existing brigades of Marines, 5 new divisions of Marines must be created to guarantee the security of the Russian Federation. We must increase the manpower of our army up to 1.5 million people, including 690,000 under contract. 2022 has resulted in a lot of changes for the system that are used for maintenance of our military equipment, and the special military operation has revealed that we need to improve and upgrade the maintenance and repairs facilities and systems. Recruiting officers, recruitment officers must also undergo reform, including digital reform. Comrades, Supreme Commander-in-Chief, at your approval, all the suggested changes will be carried out within the armed forces. The priority objectives for 2023 include the continued special military operation until victory. We need to preserve peace and security in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Syria, and fully implement the entire range of measures to prevent NATO's further expansion to the east. We need to prepare for and carry out Zapad 2023 strategic command post exercises and deploy in the strategic nuclear armed forces 23 new systems equipped with Yars, Avangard and Sarmat ballistic missiles, to include to deploy 3 strategic Tu-160 aircraft, 4 new submarines and 12 surface warships, to increase the supplies of Kinjal and Zircon anti-aircraft system, as well as continue work on new test samples and new equipment. Considering the situation with the mobilization and other involved processes, we need to increase the number of our servicemen present participating in the operation, special military operation, up to 521,000 servicemen. We will discuss the details during the limited attendance meeting of this meeting of the Defense Ministry Board. So thank you for your attention. Comrades, as per tradition, I'd like to say a few informal words. These are words that would be of interest to all of you, I think, but they're of general interest and of interest considering the current situation. Well, as I've always written in the articles that I've published, our strategic opponents have as a goal to disintegrate and weaken our country over centuries. We haven't seen anything new coming from them. They believe that our country is just too large and too threatening. That's why they want to cut it into pieces, to destroy our unity. Over centuries, that has been their goal. I don't want to bring up any examples because you can just look it up in history books. But we have always seen these plans and ideas that somehow they will be successful at it. Well, Russia, on our part, almost always believed in a different approach. We always wanted to be a part of the so-called civilized world. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which happened, well, because of us, essentially, ultimately, we believed that a day would come very soon that we will become part of this so-called civilized world. But it turned out they weren't really happy to see us. They weren't welcoming us. We did a lot to try to reach out to them, to become a part of their world, but they didn't reciprocate, they didn't respond. Instead, they used other measures, including the use of terrorists in the Caucasus to try and split Russia up, to carve us up. And many of those present here know that perfectly well. You don't need any more arguments. You know what happened in the late 1990s, in the early 2000s. Yes, they seem to always claim that Al-Qaeda and other terrorists are all evil and unacceptable, but when it comes to Russia, well, terrorists within Russia have always been supported militarily, in terms of information, etc. All that they would continue to fight and try to divide up Russia. But thanks to the heroic acts and valor and bravery of our servicemen, of the servicemen in Chechnya, we were able to overcome this and become stronger, emerge stronger as a result. But then it got even worse. Our detractors started to use everything, to throw everything at us, use whatever means possible to attack us. They tried to brainwash the people of the former Soviet Union countries, and especially in Ukraine. They've been doing it quite successfully, because they have been prepared to do so. Even before, there have been entire facilities and institutions training people to do that. And after the coup in Ukraine in 2014, and in fact, over decades, we have been trying to build relations with the rest of the world, with Ukraine. We've been trying to build brotherly relations with Ukraine. We've been providing them loans. We've been giving them energy for free for years. No, it wouldn't work. Nothing would work. Let me remind you that as the Soviet Union disintegrated, as Ukraine became an independent country in its declaration of independence, and they wrote this, and I think that in Russia people also believed in that, they wrote it down in the declaration that Ukraine is an independent, is a neutral state. So during those times, I think that nobody saw Ukraine as a threat. We saw Ukrainians as brothers, as a people of the same culture as us, of a shared history. No threat at all. But our enemy has been very effective and very stubborn. And whatever efforts we tried to build better relations with Ukraine, it just wasn't enough. They were never effective enough. They were never ultimately successful. Let me emphasize that. It's really not our fault. Russia is not to blame here. And like I've always said, I've said this many times, I believe that Ukrainians are our brothers. I still believe so. And what's happening right now is a tragedy, is our common tragedy. But this is not a result of Russia's policies. No, it's not. It comes as a result of the policies of some third countries, those outside of our world that wanted to disintegrate us and undermine us. And so they pushed us to this limit. And so here we are. And so after the 2014 coup in Ukraine, and I'm not going to talk about the causes of the coup, I'm just saying that this was unacceptable. Let me remind you that in 2014, in February, in fact, 3 ministers of foreign affairs of Ukraine, of Poland, of France and Germany, they all came to Kiev and signed papers that they would become guarantors of talks between the opposition and the authorities that be. Just 3 days later, everyone forgot about those guarantees. All that they had to say is to come forward and say, well, we guaranteed peaceful talks. They needed to do that, then organize elections, and through political procedures, elect a new government. That's all they had to do. Whether that would be a productive government or not, we know that the existing government would lose that election. And in fact, the president of the country at the time agreed to an election. then I asked them, why the coup? Why not elections? Well, they said, they told me, well, it just happened that way. There's nothing we could do. So they made us realize that no Russian people, no Russian public officials or public figures or journalists or whatever that were in any way raising their voice to try and persuade people that Russians were their friends, these people that believed in Russia, in Ukraine, they were just murdered. And we saw that there's essentially no chance to restore good and neighborly relations with this part of our once great fatherland of the Soviet Union.
Basically, they were using blatant terror, shameless terror, brainwashing the citizens of Ukraine using neo-Nazi, ultra-nationalist ideology throughout decades. It did its job. Now look. Basically, Hitler's accomplices. They were glorifying them, making national heroes out of them, and no one is noticing this. Oh yes, they are nationalists, and there are nationalists in every country, and we too have nationalists, but we are fighting against fascism and neo-Nazism. We are not making national policy out of this, like they do in Ukraine, and everyone is pretending that they are not noticing that. Well, nationalists are something good. They are protecting national interests. But the fact that they are using neo-Nazi ideology to do that, no one is noticing that. They are wearing Nazi insignia in the centers of large cities, in the capital. Oh, it's fine. They just pretend like it's nothing special. Like in the 1990s, like in early 2000, international terrorists were used to fight against Russia. They did not care. They did not give a damn that they were terrorists, recognized as international terrorists. They did not give a damn because they were fighting Russia. The same here, they are using neo-Nazis to fight against Russia, and they don't give a damn that they are neo-Nazis. The main thing is that they are fighting against Russia. But we do care. We do give a damn. It is obvious already now that the confrontation against these forces, including in Ukraine, is unavoidable. The only question is when. And of course, hostilities, military action is always a tragedy, is always casualties. We understand it perfectly. We are well aware of that. But since it was unavoidable, it's better to do it today than tomorrow. I think everyone here attending this meeting understands perfectly what I mean. I mean the state of our armed forces and the promising weapons, equipment that we have, that other countries don't have, and we do. That gives us certain reserve. We do it. We do have it. We know what advantages we have. Nuclear trade, aerial forces, the fleet in certain segments, and so on and so forth. We are well aware of that. We know that we have it, and it is in the top shape, in the right condition. And we know what we have to do to improve our forces for counter-artillery efforts, for communications, for our infantry. Everyone here understands what I mean, and I'm sure you agree with me. But here is what I would like to emphasize. As Russia, there are not many countries like this. I'm not talking about our neighbors. They will not have anything soon. They will only receive something from the others, money, weapons, and so on. They wouldn't have anything of their own, but Russia has everything, every capability to increase the potential, and we will definitely do that without any delays, without stopping. And unlike other countries, we will use our own technological, scientific, industrial basis. We are going to develop it. We are going to train new personnel to do that. And we will resolve this task without damaging our economy and our social sphere, without forgetting our responsibilities to our people, to our citizens, if we are speaking about social areas, all the plans that we have, all the objectives that we have set, we are going to fulfill them. We are not going to repeat the mistakes of the past. One, in the interest of increasing, enhancing the military capabilities, whenever it was needed or not, we were destroying our own economy. We will not militarize the country and militarize the economy. First of all, because the level of development that we have now, the structure of our economy and so forth, it does not require that. We do not need this. And doing something to damage the country, to damage our people, to damage our economy, to harm our economy or social sphere, we are not going to do that. We will continue to improve our forces and the military component, and we will do it gradually, consistently, without any fuss. We will enhance our defense capabilities in general, and we will achieve the objective that we have for the special military operation. I agree with your proposals, considering the structural changes of the armed forces. After this board meeting, we will speak some more about this. I would like to thank all of you for everything that has been done, and I'm confident, and I think you can feel it yourselves, the sentiment in the country. The entire country is looking at the armed forces and wishes you all the best, every success, and we have no doubt that we will achieve all the results that we have outlined, that you have outlined. I have no doubt that all the objectives that we have will be definitely achieved and accomplished. Thank you. All the best.
All right, you've been watching the live feed right there from the Russian President Vladimir Putin at his meeting with the Ministry of Defense. Just about all of the Defense Department officials there with this meeting with Putin, and of course that of the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Sergei Shoigu. The final comments just now from the Russian President. He said that all objectives in the special military operation in Ukraine will be achieved. Now, some of the earlier comments coming from the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, he was saying that they are increasing the production and the use of hypersonic missiles, a weapon that is unparalleled in the world. They're also increasing the production of UAVs. Putin actually said, and it's interesting to hear a world leader say this, but he said that Russia has no limitations in funding. The military is getting everything it needs. Now, the Secretary of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, also took the podium. He said that Western countries are using all of their assets against Russian soldiers in Ukraine. Ultimately, he says that Western partners are turning a blind eye to attacks, even linking them to terror attacks. For example, the continued strikes on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, for example. Shoigu is concerned by NATO forces increasingly encroaching on Russia's border and on the border with Belarus. He also said that Russia will continue to strike energy and military-industrial complex parts of Ukraine. The country has already suffered severe losses. He also said, and this is a very interesting point that I found personally surprising, Sergei Shoigu said that the West has now spent more money in Ukraine than America spent in 20 years in Afghanistan. And finally, Shoigu saying it's a full-on information war and a war of deceit by the West against that of the Russian Federation, where you can read much more about this whole address today on our website, rt.com. For the meantime, though, political analyst John Kavalik and senior editor for Issue Inside Media is joining us here live in the wake of this enormous set of speeches.
Ok, on va écouter ça parce que je vais voir qu'est-ce qu'ils disent, ok?
Putin saying essentially the Russian army is now facing the whole might of the collective West, what you might call the best of the West. How do you read into that, John?
Well, first, it's great to be back in the studio and in Moscow. For an analyst, this is like having a multiple birthday gifts. It's very interesting to not only watch what President Putin and General Shoigu says, but it's how they say it. And also, it's the fact that what they don't say. And in this particular case, both men did talk about shortcomings. Talked about what needed to be changed. That helps give credibility. So it's really important to see that. And when the president talked about unlimited resources, you know, in the U.S., you may know there's been this discussion of blank check when it comes to Ukraine. And the Republican Party and some Democrats have said, you know, there is no blank check. It's not a blank check for anything. And in this particular case, you know, the Russian Federation is no different. You know, there is a limit. What we don't know is how elastic or inelastic that limit is. And so the government of the Russian Federation, just like every other government, is going to need to decide where to put its resources and how much can be put in. What the general said about Afghanistan, and I would expand that to Iraq. Yeah, the numbers actually are about $2 trillion over the decades. Incredible. And so thus far, the U.S. is in, by the 24th of February of next year, we'll be in for about $200 billion. And that's going to be about $100 billion defense, humanitarian related, and then there'll be another tranche of that with respect to more military aid than that. Then you combine that with the Ukrainian government saying they need $5 to $7 billion a month to operate. By the end of next year, or 2 years in, this is looking at nearly a $400 billion operation between the U.S., which will be contributing about half of it, and the European Union and non-European Union countries that are going to be contributing the other half. And this is all borrowed money. And we're not yet talking about reconstructing anything. We're just simply, so
this is, I mean, for now, it's about pumping weapons into Ukraine to further the conflict. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin said many months ago, we want Russia to bleed.
Yeah, and what's so profound about this conflict is that the same actors are providing funds to both sides. Because you have the countries that are supporting Ukraine, and that money's generally borrowed, taxpayer-borrowed money, whether it's European Union, whether United States or other governments. And on the Russian side, the exports of critical agricultural commodities and critical minerals, et cetera, those continue. And companies in those countries are paying the Russian Federation. So it's sort of unique that we have the same parties keeping this going. And in the end, it's all going to be about the money.
Well, and it's also going to be about the negotiations, John, isn't it? Because Putin keeps saying this. He says, look, whatever happens, at the end of the day, we're all going to eventually, we're going to have to come to the negotiating table. It has to come down to talks. John, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned this figure of $400 billion being spent by essentially Western professional partners, led by the US, regarding the operation, their operation in Ukraine, going against Russia. If it's a $400 billion bill right now, to what length does that suggest the certain professional partners in the West are prepared to go to either prolong this conflict or, as they say, to beat Russia in the end?
To start with, on the negotiation, President Putin, and again today, you know, he went around and pretty squarely said, you know, we're open to discuss, we want to discuss. And that's the right tack. President Zelensky has, you know, his position has basically been, here's what the Russian Federation needs to capitulate to, and then we'll have a negotiation. That's not a negotiation. That's just someone listening to you.
Is Zelensky about to go to Washington, John?
He's on his way, should be there in a few hours. That's not a visit out of strength. That's a visit out of weakness.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you, because here's the thing. So Zelensky, basically, he's been complaining for many months now that he's not getting all the weapons he needs or the funding that he needs, for example. Now, the Western press is showing this as like a college graduate coming home. They're opening up the doors to celebrate. He's probably going to speak in the Senate or something along those...
Joint session of Congress.
Well, there you go. So he's going to rally support.
Impressive.
Is Zelensky going to Washington because he is having a difficult time getting the weapons and the aid? Is that why he's going, do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think so?
Yes. There's always been a distance, and this is from February 2020, between statements by the U.S. and NATO, which has been, we're providing Ukraine with everything it needs. The Ukrainian government has said, but you're not providing everything we want. There's always been this distance between need and want, and not many people are paying attention to it. Over the past 10 plus months, that gap is narrowing. And so President Zelensky is going to go to Washington. He's going to see President Biden. He's going to meet with members. There's going to be a lot of fanfare, a lot of fawning.
They're going to roll out the red carpet, I assume.
He's going to get it. But the reality is we have a changeover in the House of Representatives come January 3rd. And Kevin McCarthy, the likely incoming Speaker of the House of Representatives, has said, there's no blank check for anything. He was criticized for that, but it's sort of what a responsible official has to say. There shouldn't be, because this isn't as though the money's been taken out of a wallet somewhere or a bank account. This is all borrowing. Everyone who's been supporting Ukraine, it's borrowed money.
So who's going to? How are they going to? Who's going to pay this back? I should ask. Who's going to foot the bill for all this? They're going to say Russia has to pay for this because Russia created all this.
And then we get to, which I've been focusing on this for a long, long time, which is the $340 billion in central bank assets that were frozen. $38 billion is in the United States. Now, this is basically a wallet, so it's cash money. And there's a reasonable belief that if someone goes into your house, burns your house down, that they should be responsible for repairing it. And so what would seem to make sense is European leaders, particularly, since they have most skin in the game, would say, well, that's our first place to look. And as a matter of fact, that should be our first place. Poland has spent a lot of money on refugees, Hungary, Romania. So let's reimburse them out of that money, or minimum, let's take the interest, about $2 billion so far, $200 million a month. But no, what they've all been saying is, no, we don't want to touch that money. We would rather borrow money to pay for the potential 350, 700 billion reconstructing Ukraine. And it gets really interesting because the reason they don't want to touch the money is they're afraid that since this is sovereign Russian government money, that if they touch it, then the primacy of the US dollar, the euro, the yen, the pound in international exchange could be jeopardized. But then then it comes to that big question. The Central Bank of the Russian Federation never made a move prior to February 24th to bring all the money back. And they haven't made an effort on the 25th of February.
Why do you think that is?
I don't have answers, but I have questions. One question is because President Putin, the government here, felt that whatever they were going to do, they were going to be able to get the money back. Second is that if they tried to start bringing it back, even if they'd done it in January, it would have been a signal, and perhaps sanctions could have started earlier, sort of pre-sanctions.
I see.
And then the third is that it's a cost of doing business. So it is what it is. But here's what's going to be a spectacular political moment. If this gets to a ceasefire or something else within President Biden's term, and if they don't want to touch this central bank money, at some point, the Secretary of the Treasury is going to send a wire transfer of $38 billion to Moscow. Now, I don't think a lot of governments are going to be able to survive that, especially a parliamentary type of government, where these heads of state and heads of government, after everything that's happened, are going to say, yep, it's all going home. So, there's still a lot to unwind with this, but in the end, my thesis has always been President Erdogan in Turkey is sort of the fulcrum upon what all of this is moving. He is going to extend an invitation to Presidents Putin and President Zelensky to come to Ankara, to the presidential complex. President Putin's going to accept first, and he's probably going to put his vehicles on the Aleutians and send them to Ankara. And the pressure then is going to be on President Zelensky to show up. And I think that we'll see that sooner rather than later, but I think we'll see it before the next tranche of $200 billion moves into Ukraine.
You talk about sooner than later, John. I wanted to ask you, there was an interesting article just a few days ago, I think it was Politico, where they basically got some conversations leaked from the US White House, where it was suggested in the White House that they're going to start whittling down the funding for Ukraine because they want to start dropping the story further down the news cycle. Now, if they were to do that, one might imagine that would not start a chain knock-on effect, a domino effect. Maybe the UK would also start giving out less. You look at this, in the past recent billions of pounds the UK has given to Ukraine, the latest tranche is only 340-odd million. That has been whittled down.
Rishi Sunak, Sunak, the new prime minister, Boris Johnson had said, we're all in, whatever takes, blank check. The next prime minister sort of continued that mistrust. But Prime Minister Sunak, he's looking at economic realities, and they've already reduced some of the funding for refugees from Ukraine. And so that is, and that isn't a commentary on whether it's right or wrong. It's just economic realities are beginning to set in because there's only so much money, that can be borrowed, and it's a matter of priorities. And what the world now, or particularly Europe and the United States, we've got COVID resurging, which adds a whole nother layer as far as the government's connectivity with the people, what money's being spent for what. And we also have this massive legislation, infrastructure legislation that's been passed, so that's coming in. And then you have Ukraine and the war with Russia sitting there. And President Macron has been forceful. Former Secretary of State Kissinger has been forceful and also gotten eviscerated for it. But the march is on toward these two heads of state, need to meet. Even if not much comes of it, we're watching for two metrics, and we don't know the answer to these. One, not enough people have died yet for either country to say enough. And the second is not enough infrastructure, and that has been destroyed. For the Russian Federation, the Ukrainians, they don't want any of this to happen, and I just came from Ukraine. But at the same time, it's a horrible question to ask. What would you rather have the Russian Federation target? Would you rather have them go after an apartment building with 300 people in it or an electrical plant? And to what you were saying about the media and moving it down, the media isn't excited about showing a burning electrical plant.
Of course.
It's not. It doesn't have that sex appeal to it. So you are seeing this movie down, and President Zelensky is going to try to gin all this back up, but there's a limited amount of resources, and also he needs to convince people he wants this to stop, because right now the message that's moving through the U.S. is what his goal is to get NATO forces in Ukraine and then having direct conflicts. But the reality is the proxy war is already here.
It's already like that. It's already like that, yeah.
When something that's been provided from another country breaks down in Ukraine, they're getting on Zoom, they're getting on Microsoft Teams, they're getting on Skype, and they're going, how do we troubleshoot this? What's the difference between someone from the armed forces of NATO being there and being available to help on Skype? So if you're the Russian Federation, you're going to say,
John, you've got a good point there. You've got a good point. Now, listen, before we go anywhere, I've got to wrap this up, but I have got to ask you one very, very quick question. It's kind of out of left field, so just bear with me here for a second, all right? And I'll wrap this up very, very quickly. Israel has produced its first ever National Intelligence Estimate report. The Israeli Ministry of Intelligence is warning that the world is standing on the precipice of a transition to a new global arrangement. The Israeli government needs to steer the nation towards strategic geopolitical goals. It says the world will soon face a series of crises striking simultaneously, and that it will reorder the planet's geopolitics, the place of technology, and the world economy. Israel needs to carefully balance its relationship with America, but also improve its relationship with so-called rivals, Russia and China. And just quickly, please, how do you read into that statement?
Self-interest, and it's not surprising, and it's probably decent strategy. What they're alluding to is China will try to absorb Taiwan, and Turkey may look at Cyprus, and they both may go simultaneously. But for the state of Israel, they get $3+ billion a year from the United States. And also, they developed the Iron Dome, which is similar to Patriot. which they've refused to give to Ukraine. And they've said it's because their relationship with the Russian Federation being able to attack sites in Syria is more important.
Yeah.
And of course, this is the country that annexed the Golan Heights, which belongs to Syria.
There you go. John, you and me, we could sit here all day having this conversation, and it's so nice to have you here. John Kavalica, the senior editor for Issue.
Good morning, everyone. This is a bit rock and roll this morning, but there's a lot of news. Check this out. The Chinese are involved in that too.
The head of Russia's National Security Council to Beijing, where he met with Xi Jinping. Dmitry Medvedev also brought a special message from Vladimir Putin, on which RT's Marina Kozareva has more details on.
They discussed a number of international issues, and they agreed once again, they reiterated the fact that their approach is very, very similar on a number of these international issues. Also, Xi Jinping said that China is ready to move closer to Russia for a fairer global governance. They discussed their strategic foreign policy cooperation, including within the UN, as well as other multilateral platforms like the SCO, BRICS, and the Group of 20. Also, of course, they touched upon the Ukrainian crisis, the Ukrainian conflict. Xi Jinping said that he expressed hope that both parties will maintain restraint, that they will maintain rationality and hold a comprehensive dialogue. There was also a letter that was passed on from Dmitry Medvedev on behalf of Vladimir Putin to Xi Jinping, and in that letter, it expressed that there was an unprecedented level of Russian-Chinese relationships, and when it comes to political dialogue, practical cooperation. The notes also expressed confidence in the continued progressive development of interstate and inter-party ties, now with the new leadership of the Communist Party of China. And also what's interesting is that Xi Jinping said that the relationship between Russia and China has withstood the test of time. Through all the international ups and downs, they remained close, and they're moving towards one direction. And once again, like they said, they reiterated the fact that their approach is similar. Now that we're seeing that the West is so eager to make it seem like they are the ones who are in charge of the world, and we're seeing now that we are talking about a multipolar world. It's not just the West in charge. So we're seeing now that Russia is pivoting more towards the East, something that we've been seeing actually happening over the last decade, really. So now they're cementing those ties, it seems, and trying to find more ways that they can cooperate, and again, cementing that friendship and that unity.
Now, the discussions all took place as the head of the Russian Space Corporation, Roscosmos, stated that Moscow and Beijing have also reached an agreement on cooperation in research in outer space. In fact, they plan to build an international lunar research station. And we spoke to China Global TV Network reporter Sun Yi, who said that Beijing's major principle in international cooperation is respect and opportunity for all.
For China, China is talking about the space as a common community, and China has always said it's open for all kinds of cooperations, not only with Russia, but with a range of other countries, including, I think, with Middle East and other countries. And talking about the moon probe, it's a long-term strategy for China, and it's aiming to build an international science research base, I think, by the year 2030. And that is a project that China has always said that's not for its own, but for the benefit of the entire humanity. And it's, again, open to all. Medvedev had delivered a letter from Putin, and China has said the chairman of that Russia Party has also vowed more cooperation of the two parties and the two nations, especially in areas in trade, energy, and agriculture, and promote that partnership as we talk about that. The full name of that partnership is China-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership of Coordination for a New Era to a next level.
All right, crossing live now to Ross Feingold, an Asia political risk analyst who's joining us here on RT International. Great to see you today, Ross. Have a look at this. President Xi Jinping has stated that China is ready to boost relations with Russia for a more, quote, just world. What does he mean by that exactly?
Well, if we want to look at it from a somewhat more simple angle, every time that China makes some statement about events in Ukraine and Russia, there's been a lot of speculation that China is backing away from what in February was described when the two leaders met, a without limits relationship. So I think, frankly, there's just a lot of wishful thinking among pundits in the West that they think China is backing away. Reality, I think, is what we saw in the statements when Medvedev was in Beijing and meeting with Xi Jinping, that this relationship looks fairly strong still. And there's a number of areas where they continue to cooperate and areas where they're looking to cooperate in the future. And sometimes I do think that analysts and politicians in the West, they read too much into things, and they put their own hopes into a potential deterioration of the relationship, but it just hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened, but you see what's happening now, Ross. You know, Russia and China, they keep talking about the interest in building this multipolar world. 10 months ago, Putin was really talking about the birth of this new multipolar world. You saw China making this historic visit to Riyadh recently, essentially saying to OPEC Plus, no more petrodollar. So, I mean, when you talk about the power mechanisms of the world, a lot of people are saying they're shifting eastwards. Is that connected with this multipolar world?
That's a great question, but we also should keep in mind that going back several U.S. presidents.
Listen to this, okay? I think it's very, very important what just happened with this moon thing. I want to... good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Qu'est-ce qui a été dit avec la Lune, là? Ça, c'est très important. Parce que... ils veulent construire un... La fille, elle a dit par 2030, the woman said by 2030, they want to have a moon base. Together with Russia for the benefit of the entire world. Listen to that sentence. This is massive news. Écoutez, là, qu'est-ce que la fille, Madame Chinoise, elle a dit? Elle a dit que la Russie, puis Medvedev, là, le gars qu'on voit, là, c'est lui qui... regardez, lui, là, Medvedev, là, pas eux autres, là, mais Medvedev, c'est lui qui avait parlé des aliens qui existaient, là, OK? C'est très important, c'est très symbolique, cette histoire-là. Il a dit... Attends, je regarde s'il y a quelque chose d'important, là. Il a dit... elle a dit que par 2030, il y aurait une base sur la...
Practically all the main countries of NATO. Nevertheless, our soldiers, sergeants, officers...
En tout cas, il y a bien des nouvelles à matin, là. Il y a 3-4 nouvelles en même temps, là. Probablement, Vlad, il montre que, regarde, c'est loin, ça commence, c'est loin d'être fini, l'affaire. Checkez toutes les générales. Checkez ici en haut, là. OK? Fait que... Oh, je veux savoir qu'est-ce qu'il dit.
You've been on the sidelines of this meeting, and wow, you know, some serious topics covered by both Putin and, of course, the Defense Secretary Sergei Shoigu as well. Give us some of the highlights, if you would.
Hi there, Rory. Well, aside from focusing on the threat that NATO and the U.S. are posing to Russia's national security, Russian President Vladimir Putin also focused a lot on the need to keep the Russian military up to modern standards. Vladimir Putin put specific emphasis on the use of combat drones, both aerial and land-based. He said that the special military operation has shown that drones are used everywhere on the modern battlefield, and Russia has the industrial capability to kick up their production. We also heard Putin say that it's very important to continue to supply Russian troops with the latest modern combat basic equipment like uniforms, boots, medical equipment, as well as rifles from the latest generation. After all, Russia's president said that the Russian state is willing to give the defense ministry as much money as it needs to accomplish its goals, and that goes also for making sure that the country's intercontinental Sarmat missiles are at the ready, as well as developing cutting-edge hypersonic weapons.
In the immediate future, for the first time, we are going to use intercontinental ballistic missile Sarmat and Comet Beauty. The troops receive missile complexes Yars. In the beginning of January next year, we are going to put in Combat Duty frigate Gorshkov with the cutting edge, like I said, that has no equivalent in the world, hypersonic missiles and systems. They are naval-based Zircon.
Now, after Vladimir Putin's speech, we heard from the country's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, mainly focused on the special military operation in Ukraine. He said that Russia is there to defend the people of Donbass who were attacked by the Kiev regime after the Euromaidan coup d'etat in 2014. And he said, as always, Russia is open to negotiations, but the West has been making the situation worse day by day. He said that the West has been supporting Ukraine in every possible sphere, specifically in propaganda, in terms of the way that the West has helped Ukraine make war criminals and neo-Nazis out to be heroes in this conflict. Now, we also heard that despite enormous casualties that Ukraine has been suffering on the battlefield, the West continues to send an unlimited, practically unlimited amount of weapons to Ukraine, which are by and large falling into the hands of international terrorists. Let's take a listen to more concretely what Shoigu had to say at this meeting.
NATO countries and the US have ramped up military help in Ukraine over $97 billion, which is more than the US has spent in Afghanistan. Some of the equipment that was abandoned by the American forces in Afghanistan is now spilling out to other areas across the globe and used by terrorists. The US is helping Ukraine with organizing information operations and propaganda operations against Russia. At the command from Washington, thousands of fake messages are being posted every day. At the same time, they're glorifying the crimes of neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian regime.
Now, in terms of plans for 2023, the defense minister outlined 3 goals. The first one is that Russia will continue to strive to accomplish its objectives in the special military operation. The second one is that Russia will continue to maintain peace in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. And the third one is that the defense ministry will continue to strive to curb NATO expansion. So that's basically a rundown of what Sergei Shoigu and Vladimir Putin spoke about at this meeting.
All right, RT's Donald Corter. Appreciate that. Thank you. So it's been a big afternoon here at Moscow with Putin addressing the Ministry of Defense. Putin's final words of the speech saying that all objectives of the special military operation in Ukraine will be achieved. Read more about that. It's RT.com.
Okay, this is massive. This is really good news, actually. This is really, really good news. That we're moving towards peace with all this thing. Well, not now, but in the near future. And they're starting to talk more and more and more about the space, about the aliens and stuff like that. This is really good news this morning. And basically, what all this means is Vlad was there, said, we're going to do what we need to do, and we're going to send engineer every day at the front, and what needs to be fixed, we'll fix. But we're not going to stop until everything that the goal are achieved. That's what he basically said. And then he said Medvedev, who is known to have talked about aliens, to China, to make a deal with China that they're going to work for peace and a new world, and then we're going to build a base on the moon. This is massive news. This is massive news. Salut Sylvie, salut tout le monde. Fait que ceux qui n'ont pas catché la patente, là, moi je vous dis, là, ça fait combien de temps qu'on regarde ça? 1h30 de temps. Ça fait 1h30 de temps qu'on regarde ça. Moi j'attendais la nouvelle de Medvedev, puis ça est arrivé. Fait que c'est encore bien mieux tout ça. C'est que là, il y a 3 nouvelles dans cette histoire-là. Vlad a dit qu'il avait vu toutes les générales. J'avais vu tant de générales à une place, moi. Il y avait plusieurs, si vous avez regardé sa gauche sur le mur, il y avait des live feeds à plein d'autres places. Vlad, il dit, on va envoyer des ingénieurs sur le bord, sur le bord, sur le front line, pour qu'ils évaluent qu'est-ce qu'on a besoin, Qu'est-ce qu'on a besoin d'améliorer? On a l'argent, on a toutes les choses pour faire ce qu'on a à faire. On va atteindre nos buts. Nos buts, c'est quoi? On le sait, là, enlever les tabernacles de nazis. Puis enlever les armes là-bas. Puis il a dit qu'on va améliorer à chaque jour. Il dit qu'il va y avoir des rapports à tous les jours. Puis à tous les jours, il faut réévaluer, il a dit. Fait que c'est loin d'arrêter cette histoire-là, là, à moins que les autres arrêtent. Fait que dans le fond, là, il dit, regarde, si vous vous rendez pas, if you don't surrender, well, we're gonna fight and we can fight. C'est ça qu'il dit. Ça veut dire que si tu don't surrender, ben, on va fight. Après ça, il a envoyé Medvedev, le gars, l'ancien président, qui est reconnu pour avoir dit que les aliens existent. Il l'a envoyé en Chine. Chine fait un deal avec eux autres, qui vont faire un space station sur la Lune par 2030. Hey, voyez-vous le writing on the wall, là? Puis en plus, la dernière question que Rory a posée Israël, il a dit, ben là il fallait qu'il s'enligne avec la Russie, là. C'est vital, là. J'attendais, moi, les nouvelles. Puis ça, c'est Equinox aujourd'hui. En passant, c'est l'Equinox aujourd'hui. Fait que l'Equinox, là, aujourd'hui, là, hey, c'est powerful. So the Equinox is today on top of everything. This is very powerful. Je vous ai dit, watch la nouvelle lune. Watch la nouvelle lune, il va arriver des affaires. Il est arrivé des affaires avant la nouvelle lune. Peut-être on va avoir d'autres nouvelles la nouvelle lune, mais là, c'est très bonne nouvelle, ça. Mais ouais, à vouloir dire, pas pour rien, hein, j'ai montré des missiles là, cette semaine, là, il y a des gros missiles, gros comme la Terre, là. On est prêt, puis là, on va mettre d'autres drones, puis là, puis c'est ça qu'ils font capoter, hein, les nazis, hein, les drones. Bien sûr, là, les drones, là, il faut utiliser plus de drones. Puis là, il faut que les drones aient du AI, puis il faut qu'ils communiquent, puis là, il faut que, hey, je te dis, là, je vais en reparler plus tard, là. Mais je te dis, c'est rock'n'roll, puis si vous avez manqué le début, écoutez-les, là. So, Valad said, well, we need drones, more drones. We love the drones. We need AI on the drone. And we know the drones have made a major pivotal shift in all this. And he said he's going to continue to attack the energy infrastructure. Puis, ça veut dire qu'il va manquer d'électricité. Il a dit qu'il allait continuer à attaquer les energy infrastructure. Ça veut dire que l'air, là, une journée, là, ça va être pitch black. Pitch black. Bon, je vous quitte là. Je vous vois plus tard, OK? Bonne journée tout le monde, OK? Oubliez pas, là. Quelle heure qui est, là? Je sais pas quelle heure qui est. Bon. Merci à tout le monde qui peut supporter mon travail, de m'aider, là, dans ces temps ici, là. Merci. Thank you everybody that can help me to support my work, and I'll talk to you soon, OK? Bye-bye.